Our Region's Business is sponsored by PNC for the Achiever in You. Welcome to Our Region's Business with your host, Bill Flanagan.
Today on Our Region's Business, closing the skills gap in our region, at least where welders are concerned. Plus, becoming a better negotiator and the big difference it can make for women in the workplace. But first, Ukraine, Russia, and the supply and price of natural gas right here in our region. Russia's annexation of Crimea and the tensions along its border with Ukraine have called into question the reliability of all the natural gas it supplies to Western Europe. And that has implications over an ocean away, right here in our region. Bill Adams is back with us. He's a senior economist at PNC, which is, of course, a sponsor of the program. Welcome. Good to have you back.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, well, who'd have thunk that something going on, on the other side of the ocean, way out in Crimea and Russia, could have implications on our burgeoning energy industry here. But you think there's a direct potential connection here?
I think there's, we can't quite see it in what's happening today in the U.S. energy industry, but I think it's going to change the conversation about natural gas and about our role in the world. Russia, right now it's September, winter's coming, Russia supplies natural gas to Western Europe, and that gas flows through the Ukraine. And it's kind of an open question over what will happen to that pipeline. Will gas be flowing? Will the Ukrainian government take the gas that's destined for Western Europe? And because Russia is in theory not supplying the Ukraine any more gas, even though there's additional gas flowing along.
So they got gas passing through Ukraine, headed to all the customers, but supposedly none of it is like turning off the pipeline and getting into Ukraine.
And I'm
right?
sure the Ukrainians are very happy that to go cold this winter with all that gas flowing through their country. So it's a messy situation, and it has a lot of European political strategists and people heads of government in Europe saying this is an untenable situation. And in addition to thinking about what they're going to do about Russia and the Ukraine, they're thinking about their own energy security and looking around. And here's in the United States we have this energy boom, and they are kind of knocking on our door and hoping that we'll play a role in that. And that's, I think, something that's now on the table. I think that's something that's going to be part of the discussion in Washington about how to manage natural gas in the U.S.
Well, already some debate about exporting our natural gas supplies potentially into the world market. So you think this puts additional pressure or creates an additional incentive? It makes a geopolitical argument now potentially to do it beyond just the economic argument.
Well, yeah, so from the economist perspective, it's about trade-offs, right? You have the environmental, the economic trade-offs, and then now you have these additional strategic considerations where if the U.S. we now have approved energy infrastructure to export, I think somewhere around 5 to 10% of our annual production in natural gas. And if we had, if that number goes up and we're able to affect the global balance of supply and demand of this, then I think that would change the calculations of other governments around the world when something like this Russia-Ukraine thing happens. And that's, I think, top of mind in Germany and France and in the UK.
Well, I can see why if you're drilling the gas would be attractive to tap the world market, because isn't the price everywhere else a lot higher than it is here, right?
Yes, it is.
So, but the implications of that, if right now we have a cost advantage in terms of the supply of natural gas around here in the United States, that presumably would go away, right, if we're operating in a global market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated issue. I think for the United States, it's a question of are we worried about the price going up? Do we think that supply can catch up with demand if we were to start exporting more? And is that trade-off worth it if it means that we're going to be more secure in the world? And those things are really hard to measure, and I think we're probably just getting started, but in the discussion of it. But I think this is just going to be, this is an issue that if you're interested in the region and the politics of what affect our economy, it's going to be only more and more important over the next couple of years.
Wow, all of a sudden, we're thrust into this global conversation. But I also I don't understand that in Europe, they have these deep underground shale deposits too. Potentially there's an energy resource underneath them, but a lot of reluctance to tap it.
There is a lot more reluctance to tap it in Europe. A lot of the areas that have shale deposits in Europe are much more densely populated than comparable areas in the United States. That enters into it some. I think just the politics of energy are also very different in Europe, and that also enters into it. And I think that kind of from the U.S. perspective, it is what it is. It looks like, I mean, maybe opinions there will change, but in the short run, they're not going to be producing shale gas in the way that we are.
And so long as the supplies keep flowing from the Russia, it's not a crisis. It's not a crisis potentially.
Not yet. And I mean, I think in we have our baseline forecast. In the baseline, we're not expecting them to shut off gas supplies, but that is a risk.
It's a great illustration, though. You can have all the great financial, mathematical, economic models you want, but at the end of the day, a lot of this just comes down to policy decisions in Europe, policy decisions in the Kremlin, policy decisions in the United States.
Yeah, I think policy is very important. It's something that, as you said, we can't model, but we have to kind of follow and have a view of what will happen if it goes in whichever way it goes.
Okay, and well, implications for the U.S. economy if indeed, there was a real crisis in Europe around supply in the short run, because we can't, the infrastructure doesn't exist to move a lot of gas over there anyway quickly.
I think in the short run, I don't really see a good solution to get natural gas to Western Europe. I think if Russia really were to shut off supplies, which would probably mean that there's a more intense military conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, that's probably sending the Eurozone and Europe back into recession, which is a drag on U.S. exports. But I think the rest of the global economy is actually doing all right. It's kind of improving in fits and starts. I think downside risks to the global economy are probably not as bad, not as worrisome this year as they were last year. Things are getting better outside the United States, just as they are here.
Okay, it's a big world. So apart from this one issue in a big place in Europe, there's other good things happening around the world right now.
I think it's fair to be a touch more optimistic. I mean, that's the reason why we're expecting the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates next year, because the economy here is improving, and you see similar things going on in many major U.S. trading partners: Canada, Mexico, the United Kingdom.
All right.
So
that's encouraging. Good enough. I would ask you about the implications of the big Scottish vote last week, but unfortunately we're taping this segment on Thursday and we don't know the outcome. But we'll have you back to understand the geopolitical implications of that.
I look forward to it. Thanks again for having me.
All right, very good. Bill Adams from PNC. Good to see you. Thanks. Next up, welding. It's one of the most in-demand jobs in our region thanks to the oil and gas industry. And we'll take a look inside a brand new training center that's out to fill the skills gap. Stay with us.